Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Q&A edition of Optimal Relationships Daily, episode 1259. I'm your host, Greg Audino. Really grateful that you've stopped in again and decided to spend some of your Saturday with us as we seek to help out another one of your fellow listeners. And before we begin, just a reminder that if you have a question you would like answered on the show, you can email it in to advice@oldpodcast.com, and you will most certainly hear back from us. So with that, let's get right to today's listener question and optimize your life. What is probably stressing me out most lately is the feeling of losing control and struggling with the fact that we cannot control everything. I have a strong faith, but I've been having a hard time trusting and giving all of myself. I have always been a worrywart, even at a young age, having ulcers from fear and stress. Okay, and I thank you for sending this in, Asker. Good question, vulnerable question. I too am left with a lot of questions that I'm wondering about, questions that could be helpful for your own self-reflection. So first and foremost, what types of things do you want to control specifically? See if you can identify what areas of life you focus on not being able to control the most, because in doing so, you might find some relief or clarity in knowing what your values are or what your insecurities are. They're often very intertwined, though we might not care to admit it. And this might also help you realize that control does exist in some areas, or perhaps that some things you try to control aren't in line with who you want to be at your core. So look to this first and take some time to think about what the things you're trying to control specifically say about you. And once you're able to identify some of these things, I think that in order to extract as much information as possible out of them, the questioning then deepens. So you might have questions like, why do you want to control these things? What are you telling yourself about the consequences of not being able to control them? And are these concrete truths or just stories? Have you also entertained the possibilities of how good outcomes could come from this lack of control? Now, being that this is a long-standing pattern, as you mentioned, this sense of worry, you might also find it helpful to either do some self-work or enlist a therapist to help you get to the root of where this began. See, those questions I rang off are great for putting you into the present, which can be wonderful, but there can also be immense value in learning more about where this comes from and sympathizing with that part of yourself and your past. And when they're done in tandem, you're in a position in which you can toe the line between making healthy changes, but also accepting this part of yourself. Accepting yourself, perhaps for the first time, as someone who worries and wants control more than others. And maybe there's good to this being a lasting personality trait. Maybe it's just part of who you are, and battling to accept it, so, feeling bad about feeling bad, is giving you a whole separate thing to worry about. I'm saying that in addition to worries about not being able to control the world around you from like a metacognitive standpoint, those worries are then compiled by your worry to not be able to control or silence this part of yourself that craves the control. And hopefully that's easy enough to grasp. Rewind it if you need to, because frankly, this stuff can be hard for me to describe, let alone absorb. Worry and control, they're ultimately about looking for power, right? The worrywarts and the control freaks, as they're often called, are going through the same thing, which is just a lack of trust in their ability to recover from that which is unexpected, that which is undesirable, or that which they somehow feel unprepared for. I'm sort of going through something similar right now. It's been a big goal of mine recently to, instead of trying to think so far ahead to avoid future problems, rather trust in myself to manage any problems that ultimately arrive in spite of my planning. And for me, the struggle to do that, I think, has come from just exhaustion of trying to recover from things in the past, things that, in retrospect, I could have prepared better for or avoided. It's hard to trust that I have more tools and experience to help me through nowadays, but telling myself that I don't, that's just a story. It's not true. And future troubles that I could somehow be avoiding now, they're completely inevitable, which goes for everybody. So take that with you, and perhaps that can help you navigate your situation a bit better. Maybe not. One last thing I do want to mention, though, is the role that your faith plays, because you mentioned having a strong faith. I guess my instinct is to wonder whether or not underneath you might be struggling with a type of identity crisis or self-shaming for doubting your faith and not trusting in it fully. Just because people of strong faith can take a lot of pride in the feelings of nobility surrounding that, and it can be a massive part of one's perceived self-worth. So if you feel there may be some of that there, I'm compelled to issue a statement saying that it is also important for anyone who cares deeply about their faith to work on accepting the fact that periods of doubt are perfectly normal. It's okay to not be aligned with your faith sometimes. It is okay to question it and act against it and go through phases during which you feel detached from it. So being open and entertaining the breaks in the road on your journey to faithful living only stand to strengthen your relationship with faith and your relationship with yourself. Again, I'm not certain this is something you're dealing with. You didn't mention it, but I wanted to address it because it can be difficult to identify sometimes. Okay, everybody, and that will take us to the end. I hope that the asker and you listeners alike found this helpful and that you all find a chance to examine the parts of your life that you want to control, why you want to control them, and how strong you might actually be in spite of your inability to have the level of control that you desire. So sit with that, see what comes up. I'm going to get out of here, but I hope to see you again tomorrow in the Sunday show. That's where your optimal life awaits.